earlier today talking about his quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, who, if you've been asleep for the last 24 hours, suffered a concussion yesterday in the second half of the win over the Browns. Here's Reid.
I really don't have any injuries to talk about other than Patrick's, and he's in protocol there. So, and we'll just follow that and see how he does here the next couple days.
I don't have injuries to talk about, except the most important guy on the team. Other than that, we're fine. No problem, other than the fact that we may not have Patrick Mahomes. I don't want to be flippant about it, but we don't know that he's going to be cleared to play. And, I asked the league if they have any numbers that they keep, because my recollection is, Shireen, and tell me if I'm wrong, when they first became sensitive to the concussion problem, 2009, October 28, DeMaurice Smith and Roger Goodell got called up to Capitol Hill. They had a big hearing, and that was the lesson and the message. Take it seriously and get guys off the field if they have a concussion, and don't let them back on until they've been properly cleared by an independent neurologist. Fine. The first few years, if you had a concussion one Sunday, you didn't play the next Sunday. Now, when a guy has a concussion, it seems like more often than not he does play. The NFL said the median number of missed days by a quarterback due to a concussion from 2015 through 2019 is 7. 29 quarterbacks in the sample size. And keep in mind, as the doctors will say, if you've seen one concussion, you've seen one concussion. Everyone is different. And the thing that was different about Mahomes yesterday, there wasn't any obvious traumatic blow to the head. There was kind of a dragging down, and it was his neck, but he was clearly woozy, clearly affected. And it's all down to, Shireen, how quickly his brain recovers from the trauma. Could be Sunday, could not be Sunday. We may not see him again until the Super Bowl, assuming that the Chiefs somehow win with Chad Henne.
And Andy Reid had an unfortunate phrase that he used. He said it was a no-brainer, and I'm sure he didn't mean it this way, obviously. But it is a no-brainer from a coach's standpoint, because the coach has nothing to do with whether he can play or not play. He just has to get his team prepared, and prepared if he plays, prepared if he doesn't play. And that's what Sean McDermott said, too. We'll prepare for 2 quarterbacks, and that's what you have to do at this point. Basically, you're preparing for a system. But I'm sure they'll have to put 2 game plans in, Mike, because they're not going to know. It's out of their hands. An independent neurologist has to clear Patrick Mahomes from this. It's not going to be simply the Chiefs saying he's good to go and Patrick Mahomes saying I can play. It's not going to be that simple. And best case scenario probably for the Chiefs is he's not going to practice much, if at all, this week, Mike. But if they can just get him back on the field, they'll be happy with that.
2 levels of clearance by the independent neurologist, 1 to practice, 2 to play. And the mere fact that the NFL incorporated the independent neurologist, and I know it's got a more fancy official name, but basically it's somebody who's not on the team payroll. Pre-2009, and we've gotten so used to this now we forget what the world was like before. Before 2009, the doctor who was paid by the team was signing off on whether or not the quarterback or any other player could play with a concussion. And obviously, if that doctor wanted to continue to be employed by the team to provide services to the players, it wasn't going to keep players away from the team. And that has been removed. And it seems to have been, once they apply, Shireen, the concussion label, it seems that is followed and that is respected and that is honored. The challenge is getting to the application of the concussion label. And I was watching very carefully yesterday. Would they take Patrick Mahomes to the locker room? The locker room is the best place to do the full-blown concussion evaluation. And he was so obviously impaired that was an easy decision to make. We've seen guys who weren't clearly woozy and guys who work their way back onto the field, like Russell Wilson a few years ago. So, we always worry about an issue like that in the postseason, and you don't want to have a guy unnecessarily be put in the locker room for 15 minutes, and it turns out he didn't have a concussion. In this case, the protocol worked. Mahomes was scratched, and now we see if the protocol on the back end works, and if it works in favor of the Chiefs or in favor of the Bills, because there is a clear strategic opponent here. And he's got a bad toe. We forgot about the bad toe.
Yeah.
The big toe, he clearly had his foot bent in because he was trying to put weight on the outside of the foot away from the big toe. That's an issue as well. And, I said earlier today on PFT Live, it could have been a blessing in disguise that he suffered the concussion in a weird sort of way because it got him off the foot and it avoided any further damage to the foot. So maybe if he'd played the whole game, the toe would have been too much of a problem for him to play this Sunday. But we'll see how that all plays out. We have the toe, we have the concussion, and we may or may not have Patrick Mahomes come Sunday.
Yeah, and Andy Reid blew off the toe issue, but he was limping around, Mike, and he was not the same guy. And, I was surprised that he ran on that particular play simply because the toe was messed up, and it didn't look like a hard hit. And I know we just put up what Mama Mahomes said, Randy Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes' mom, said on Twitter and criticized Mac Wilson for the hit. But, the hit didn't look that bad. It didn't look like he took the direct hit to the head, and I really thought that it was going to be a neck injury. And then you got up, like you said, you saw he was woozy. You saw he was out of it. You saw he probably had a concussion at that point. It didn't even take a neurologist at that point to say he's got to get back to the locker room to be tested out for this thing because he doesn't know where he is. So hopefully he's okay and can get back on the field and can even practice some this week. We'll just see how that plays out. But in a weird sort of way, Mike, this works in the Chiefs' advantage a little bit because the Bills do have to prepare for both quarterbacks. They do have to spend that time on Chad Henne that they otherwise wouldn't have done.
And Chad Henne gave them something to think about. It ended up being a good thing that Patrick Mahomes didn't play Week 17. Chad Henne able to knock off some rust and be ready to go 2 weeks later when it was time for him to come in with very short notice. Back to the Randy Mahomes thing, and we're going to talk later about the actual hit and the penalty and whether he should have been running, etc. But as to whether it was an illegal hit, there was a lowering of the helmet and initiation of contact, and it doesn't have to be helmet to helmet. But that penalty gets called so haphazardly. We saw a clear violation when Daniel Sorensen hit Rashard Higgins and caused the fumble that went out of the end zone, and that was the focal point of the controversy. There still was an uncalled foul for lowering of the helmet and initiating contact. We saw it in the Saints-Bucks game. It was a grazing of the helmet by the lowering of the helmet. It wasn't a direct blow, and they called it then. So this is something that was written so broadly. There are so many hits that fall within the boundaries of a violation, and sometimes they get called and sometimes they don't. The key will be whether or not Mac Wilson gets fined, Shireen, this weekend. That would be the concession by the league office that maybe it should have been flagged for lowering the helmet, making contact with the opponent, and in this case, contributing to the concussion that Patrick Mahomes suffered.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.